Welcome back to IGN's Summer of Gaming, your place for June's game announcements, exclusive gameplay, and so much more. And today we've got another new game to show off. In partnership with Sega and Creative Assembly, we're proud to reveal a brand new game. Earth is broken. The rich pricks that ruined everything are now living their best life on Mars, while everyone else is roughing it in space slums. But the tides are turning. The rich have stolen everything. Don't you think it's time to steal it all back? This is Hyenas.
I said stop playing with the merch and move.
Can't you see we're busy?
Yes, very busy, darling.
Hyenas pits 5 teams of 3 against each other in the environment to engage, evade, exploit, and of course, steal their way to victory. Let's find out everything we can about Hyenas right now.
What's up, everybody? I'm Destin, and joining me to talk about Hyenas is Creative Director at Creative Assembly, Charlie Busha. Charlie, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks, Destin. Very excited to be here talking about Hyenas.
Well, why don't you tell everybody what is Hyenas?
Hyenas is a multiplayer, multi-team robbery game. It's 5 teams of 3 set on these vast spaceships full of security, switches, and gadgets. And our heroes, our anti-heroes, the Hyenas, they're these misfit pirates plunging their way through this pop culture galaxy, shooting cliffs, jacking ships, and robbing rich pricks. So basically, in our world, in our universe now, the rich have finally made it to Mars. The billionaires finally made it to Mars and made this paradise tax haven, and they left us all behind. But the tech they used destroyed the Earth. So a few million of us managed to get off, and we're living in a floating, orbiting slum known as a taint. The billionaires are doing fine, of course, as they always are. But the one thing they miss on Mars is the pop culture flotsam we left behind when we evacuated. So they send these vast plunder ships back to Earth to pick this stuff up and to bring it back to Mars to sell it to their customers, where it gives them status, nostalgia, and it's what they really miss. But our anti-heroes, the Hyenas, they've lost their future, and they're not going to take that lying down anymore. So they're going to attack these plunder ships as they come past and rob them of this merch. And these ships aren't defenseless. Like I said, they're full of security, they're full of sensors and switches and interactive systems and gadgets. So you've got this great environment for this competitive game to take place on. Some people might call it PvEVP, but we call it PvEEVP, 3 times the gameplay.
Well, that sounds really, really cool, and you've actually used a unique art style to tell this story. How would you describe the look that you've gone for? Why did you go for that look, and what tone are you trying to set with it?
Yeah, sure. I think there's 2 parts to this answer. And the first thing is it's very important to us that when you look at the game, when our players see this game, they can tell it's brazen and irreverent and larger than life, but they've also got to tell it doesn't take itself too seriously. So we went for something that was somewhat illustrative as well. So I'd call it really graphic novel cover style, I guess. It's very easy when you're making a sort of apocalyptic near future game to go dark and gloomy, but we didn't want to go that way. It didn't fit the tone. We wanted something brighter and more welcoming. So we avoided that sort of gloomy 80s neon cyberpunk look and instead went for what I call an app punk look. So we have these corporations running Mars, and we've got this concept of big data and gamification, and really consumers as products. That's what we're riffing off here. So we wanted to get this sort of like dystopia, this authoritarian dystopia via a well-being app, if you like. So that's kind of like what's shaped the look of the game.
So you've told me a little bit about this world. I'm really curious, is there a single player component or is there lore in the multiplayer where I can learn more about what's happened to this universe?
So this is a multiplayer game. It's a fast-paced multiplayer experience. But we've built this really rich, deep lore, fun and funny too, right? And the whole game experience is imbued with this. The environments, the messaging around the environments, the actual game mode itself, how we present all of the gadgets, and of course, what all of the characters, the hyenas, what they talk about themselves, what they talk about the world they're in, and their relationships with each other. But what really drove the development of hyenas was when we started thinking about this game, battle royales were becoming popular, and we were really interested in how they broke the paradigm of the two-team arena battle, and they create these really asymmetrical, unpredictable experiences. It might be 3 or 4 teams coming together of various sizes in combat. You would face off with each other with completely different loadouts. I might have a frying pan and you might have an AK. And of course, where you started in the game was luck. So we really like the way these unpredictable, almost chaotic, asymmetrical situations create new gameplay and new tactics, and importantly, new player stories. And so that's what we took from it. We didn't want to make a battle royale, but we wanted to take that idea of creating this sort of unpredictable, chaotic space where players would find this new gameplay, find new tactics, and ultimately find new player stories.
Can you actually tell me about one of those unexpected gameplay moments that you experienced?
Yeah, I can tell you loads about them. So it could be that your team's been wiped and you are racing to find a respawn point, and you're flying down one of our zero-G corridors, and you've got bullets whizzing behind you, clanging off all the metal, and you're dropping grenades behind you in zero-G, to try and blow them, of course. And you make it to an open door, and you just manage to slide under before it slides down shut, and then you turn around and you foam it shut, and you've got maybe 20 seconds to get away. That's quite, those sorts of things happen, and then it may be that you're attacking one of the vaults to rob the merch, and you're dealing with the security systems. Then all of a sudden another team comes in and starts trying to ambush you, and you've really got to try and work out. Do you disengage? Do you try and maneuver around the NPCs, get an advantage, and kind of like push them onto the other team? And or it could be that you win that encounter and you finally get to the vault. You get to the vault, and you open it and you step in, and what you're stealing, well, maybe it's actually the first album that you ever bought. And I'm really happy, right, that, if I can be a heretical creative director and have a moment of anti-immersion, right, where we really touch you, and for a second you feel the emotion the characters in the game and the Mars Elite do as they feel that connection with that piece of IP.
Well, I have to ask about the characters. There's a lot of very colorful characters in this game. Do they have any unique abilities? How do they each differ?
So when we started making the characters from a gameplay perspective, of course you have your hero tropes, gameplay tropes, but for hyenas, we had this common gameplay thread running through every part of the gameplay, which was engage, evade, exploit. And we see that in the characters, we see that in the ships, in the gadgets, in the vaults. And we wanted to answer this question, right? We wanted to give players maximum agency when they played this game. So evade characters, obviously they go in all guns blazing, they have a very unsubtle approach to the game. And then we have evade. Evading hyenas is a little bit of stealth, I guess, and a little bit of recon, but really it's a celebration of fast-paced, skillful movement. So be that dodging in between laser tripwires on your way to a vault, or slaloming down a zero-G corridor. And then we have exploit. And exploit is the intelligent way to play hyenas. It's about using the ship systems, the NPCs, the switches, the gravity systems, and the chaos to your advantage. So we think about those 3 concepts when we're creating all of our characters.
So I have to ask, how did you invent these characters' personalities? I think a lot of characters nowadays in games have become fan favorites through their personalities, through various lines or lore, and I'm really curious to hear how you developed these characters' backgrounds.
Yeah, that was a really fun challenge. So once we understood their gameplay space, as we talked about before, we then applied two creative pillars. One was anti-heroes. Why are these people criminals? What is it that they're missing? And then the other one was out of place in space, right? So for these characters to be out of place in where they are, we have to really ground them somewhere else. We wanted our hyenas to be extremely relatable and recognizable. So we look for archetypes that we all know, right? That you may follow or you may be friends with or you see on TV or whatever. And then once we understood what that archetype was going to be and our creative and concept teams worked those up, we then work with consultants who knew that archetype particularly well. Right? It's very important to us that we made fully rounded characters, not stereotypes. So we work with the consultants to get all the rich detail of who these people were. And then the next stage was to cast the actor very carefully and then work with them to develop the character even further. One of the fun things we did was we would run these mockumentary interviews where we would ask them to improv an interview, really, where we were asking them questions about their life on the taint and why they became a hyena, and they'll be improving why that was. And it's through a combination of these kind of four things, our creative teams, the consultants, the actors and the gameplay. It's through those four things that we brought these characters and made really rounded, three-dimensional gameplay characters. And we're really looking forward to revealing these as we move forward development.
Thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. But don't go anywhere, everybody else, because right now we have an exclusive developer Rewind Theater picking apart that announcement trailer for Easter eggs, secrets, and so much more. And right after that, we're sitting down with design director on Hyenas, Alex Bro.
I said stop playing with the merch and move.
Can't you see we're busy?
Very busy, darling.
In a special partnership with Sega and Creative Assembly, IGN is teaming up with the developers behind Hyenas in a special Rewind Theater of their announcement trailer.
Hi, I'm David Nicholson, executive producer on Hyenas at Creative Assembly. This is the IGN Rewind Theater for the Hyenas official announce trailer. So we start off in this amazing space, looking out on the broken Earth. You can see clearly that this is meant to be a New York ship. And what we love about this is the amount of space. We've got long-range combat, we've got zero-G gameplay, so it's a great space to have fun in our FPS. We're looking here at the character of the bank robber. He's called the Pro. When we're coming up with our characters, we thought it'd be really fun to have a classic bank robber. This guy is that classic New York criminal. He's armed with a shotgun, and in his backpack is his deployable turret. What you'll also see that on his feet are these green lights. They signify that his mag boots are on. Green lights mean that they're on, red lights mean that they're off. And this is fantastic. You'll see in this space here that everything else is floating around in zero G, but the bank robber's firmly rooted to the ground thanks to his mag boots. We wanted the Pro to have the old school bank robber vibe, so we gave him a Richard Nixon mask. It's one of many nods to pop culture that you're going to see peppered throughout the game, throughout the universe and the world. Here we introduce the Murphs. These are the NPCs, security crew, guarding the loot on the ships. The guys on the outsides are the traditional grunts, but the big one in the middle, that's the elite. He's the most powerful one. He's got a sweeping beam to force crowd control, and he's going to take either special abilities or really good team collaboration to take out. And here's another one of our hyenas. This is Commander Wright, our astronaut. She's the only one who's meant to be there. She's the only one who isn't out of place in space. So as a young kid, she dreamed of being an astronaut. She trained all her life. She was looking forward to getting off on one of the major missions out into space. And then the crack happened, and all of her dreams were shattered. So now she's roaming around spaceships, running around with misfits, trying to steal loot from these crazy Murph on these plunder ships. Here we start to introduce Clout. They're the corporation that basically run everything on Mars. They're the bad guys. They're the ones that are sending the plunder ships down to Earth to pillage all of that precious loot that we're now trying to steal back off them. Here we see our bank robber, the Pro, sliding down the interior of a New York subway carriage. That's clearly been lifted from Earth, being taken back to Mars for the benefits of some billionaire who wants a New York-themed attraction in his backyard. So here you can see the "For the Win" reference, obviously. Another reference there to League of Legends. If you know, you know. And just underneath that is the Atari pin. Quite a number of grenades. This one's the sticky grenade. Does exactly what it says on the tin. Down in the corner there you can also see the red barrels. What first-person shooter doesn't have red barrels? And obviously shoot those and they're going to explode. And here we're introducing another one of our playable hyenas. This is Doc Hotfix. He's one of our support characters. He's clearly a gamer, and to deal with the trauma of the crack, he now absolutely believes that he's a character in a video game. One of the things I love about Doc Hotfix here is, as a gamer, he really leans into making comments in his dialogue about our game design, our systems design, some of our gadgets and gameplay. It's really fun for us to lean into this self-referential attitude of one of the characters in the game. So we've got a great scene here where two of the teams are facing off against each other, trying to decide what to do, because any moment now the Murph are going to burst in. Should they start fighting each other? Should they team up and fight the Murph? What's going to happen next? It's one of those classic standoff moments. If you've seen the film Anchorman, you'll recognise that we've got the brick, the mace, and for those eagle-eyed of you, there is another one in there. See if you can spot it. Here we've got another pop culture reference, the classic Sony Sport Walkman. We've got a whole range of real-world objects scattered throughout the universe from a variety of different decades. Hopefully there's something for everybody to recognise and smile about. Here we're back to Commander Wright. You can see her using her own personal special ability, the foam gun. Such a fantastic tool, so many uses. Here she's using it to create cover and also blocking this corridor to keep those Murph at bay. Here's some more nods to pop culture. You'll recognise the classic Green Army Man and a hot dog fall guy. It's exciting for us to have throughout the universe these references to items that today you may discard as fairly worthless. But in the Hyenas universe, these are worth dying for. These are precious, priceless loot items. It's worth fighting other teams for. It's worth risking your life for. Here we see Doc Hotfix again, throwing his flashbang. Does exactly that. It flashes and it bangs. Super useful. Back to Commander Wright and her foam gun, creating traversable pathways here to get from one ledge to another with her team. Also can be used to create platforms on walls to scale up to higher places. We've got loads of Easter eggs in this trailer, but I'm just going to call out two here. The bone on the left is a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and this awful picture of a dog. Let me explain that. Now, it was on the whiteboard behind our development director during our video calls during lockdown, and it really drove our art director crazy, so we thought it would be fun to put it in the trailer. Yes, that's the Statue of Liberty. Early on in Hyenas, we were thinking what would be the most brazen thing that these billionaires would want to steal from Earth? The Statue of Liberty, such an iconic piece of culture. They're now getting that and just going to stick it in their back garden. Here we've got the pro bank robber and his special ability, the turret. Fantastic tool to throw out in front of you, clear an area, or even just stop people daring to walk through a door. Here we've got a reference to two street artists, Snub and Sprite. They helped develop the graffiti that you'll see throughout the trailer. And top right, you'll see this cheeky foreshadowing of what's just about to happen to the Murph, with a reference to the Viscera cleanup detail.
I said stop playing with the merch and move.
Can't you see we're busy?
So these plunder ships, they're really just huge floating malls. What you can see here is front of house, where we're selling this New York memorabilia. We've got references to Cat's Deli, we've got pastrami on rye. It's a fantastic place to see these iconic callbacks to New York. What I want to call out in this shot in particular is the gravity switch. Allows you to switch gravity both ways. You can turn it on or off. Really great gameplay opportunities here for surprising a team who are coming in, floating across, and you suddenly switch gravity on, they plummet back down to the floor. We had great fun with this shot, and you can do something very similar in the game. You can fire your grab hook onto somebody else, and they'll just drag you around in 0G. So that was the official Hyenas announced trailer. Thanks for watching. Join the pack and sign up for the alpha. We'd really love to have you.
Who knew an announcement trailer packed so much info? Here to dive even deeper on the gameplay of Hyenas is design director Alex Bro. Alex, thank you so much for bringing the trailer today. How are you doing?
Good. You?
I am doing very, very good. I'm very excited to talk about Hyenas, and the trailer makes it look pretty fast-paced. Would you agree with that? And if so, how are you thinking about time to kill, weapon feel, all that good stuff in gameplay design?
So first, yes, as you're saying, Arena is really a fast-paced game, and we really built our game to make sure that it was making the most out of that fast-paced, movement-based combat. A lot of what we are doing in terms of combat is, to a certain extent, calling back to a more arcade shooter feel, but obviously with a much more modern take on it. So it's all about movement, about that fast action, and really trading action for the player. When you're talking about the time to kill and the TTK, we needed to make sure that we had the right one and a relatively long one to make sure that it was giving space for the player to be able to express themselves during the fight. If you take that a bit in perspective, like if we would have had a shorter time to kill, the focus would have been much more about the anticipation leading to that point of contact. What we wanted in Arenas was to make sure that once you're in contact with the enemies, you have room and time to be able to change the situation, use the abilities of your characters, and on top of that, we have so many things. So there's enemies, NPCs, the security guards, multiple teams. So that gives time for the player to react, change the situation, and adapt, and make the most out of it. For example, making sure that they are using their ability to distract the NPCs, attract them more on the other players to be able to get that moment, locking themselves out of that room to be able to heal back, prepare themselves, and go back in the fight. So that time is to give them the player themselves the time to be able to express themselves and make the most out of the feature. And obviously that's something that we'll continue balancing on, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to an early close alpha, to make sure that the player have their input in that and is in that journey with us to make sure that we have the best balance out of the combat.
So it does sound like there's an escape element or an evasion element, along with various security systems in the game that we've heard about previously. Are there stealth components to Hyenas, though?
Yes, in terms of how it works with the PvE side and with the security guards, there's a lot of options about how the player can approach that. But we didn't want to make that just about traditional stealth. It's not about crowding behind crates slowly or hiding in a corner waiting for patrol guards for a guard to finish his patrol. It's much more about, again, movement and fast pace, and it goes in terms of choice for the player around our three gameplay pillars. Engage, which is going on gun blazing, taking the enemy head on. Evade, which is all about movement. Again, it's about that fast-paced movement. So when you're evading against the NPC and the guard challenge and the security challenge, it's much more about how you use that movement to be able to reach your objective, evading the direct confrontation. So to give an example of that, it could be using zero gravity to reach a vent that is otherwise inaccessible, and then going to that vent through fast movement, sliding out under detectors, jumping over threat to get to the vault without being detected. The last gameplay pillar, which is exploit, is all about to manipulate your systems or manipulate the security system, the security guards, or the other players to your own advantage, distracting them, or I've talked about gravity, for example, switching gravity to change the setup in which you are, or using some of the other systems to your advantage.
Alex, I have to ask, how big are the maps here? It's a 15-player game, which would seem to not quite require a full Battle Royale size map, but at the same time, the trailer gives off a vibe that there's going to be a lot going on in each round. Would you say that the maps are bigger than traditional deathmatch maps, but smaller than Battle Royale maps?
Yeah, that's pretty much right. The size of the map is in between those. we needed to make sure that we have enough space for the main elements that we needed for the game. So there's some space that is needed to have each of the PvE challenge with the security areas around them. We also needed to have enough space to have the 5 teams and some room for them to be able to play so that they're not all pushed together from the beginning of the game. That means that it's larger map than a deathmatch map, but it doesn't need to be as large as a Battle Royale map because that is with much more players. The biggest difference, however, is not about the size, but the type of map it is. Most Battle Royale maps are open and much more open. The game is taking place on spaceship, so that pushed us to have really different space to be able to support the gameplay and give different opportunity and different play space for the players. There's larger structure like service core where you'll be able to move in zero gravity. There's some closer area around rooms, corridors where you'll find more of the security guards and the security system protecting the merge and the vault, and some hubs in the middle that you can choose where you want to go out of there. So it creates a lot of variety within each of those spaceships, but from one spaceship to the other, we'll make sure that we have a different feel and different composition in terms of gameplay.
You actually brought up Zero G, and I'm really curious, mechanically, how is Zero G going to work in this space?
So zero gravity is really one of the elements that we wanted to push to get that right space feel within hyenas. And more than that, we wanted to make sure that we were approaching it in a way that is true to our game, fast-paced, about movement and trading. And on top of that, we needed to make sure, and sorry for the bad pun, that it was easy to jump in for new players. So the way the zero gravity is working for in hyenas is that it's a point-to-point system. Basically, you start from one surface and you'll be able to push yourself and jump toward another surface. And while you're making that flight, you have limited air control. So it's really about that still fast movement, it's trading, and it goes back to that idea that being in zero gravity, it's not slowly floating in space, it's falling in every direction, and you're using that to move quickly through the space. Where it gets really interesting, obviously, is when you get in combat in that, you will have those kind of dogfighting moments against other player in the zero gravity space. And that's why we have other elements for the player to have finer control, to be able to sometimes change their direction, or using your MacBook to go back to the floor and propulse yourself again.
So how have you balanced the Zero G map space to make sure that there are spaces on and above ground for players to explore? And how do you handle combat within that space?
So in terms of how we integrated zero gravity within the map, we really made that from the beginning, making sure that it's well integrated. We have overall 2 types of space regarding gravity within our ships. Some of those are always meant to be in zero gravity. There's never artificial gravity in there. They are, for example, the service core, the large structure that is holding the ship together, where you'll find some engineering stuff, or larger cargo space that doesn't need to have gravity in there. And those are really interesting because they are for the player, because they are more open. You can fully use the speed that you can get out of zero G. And then those are really built to have those 360 combat, more akin dogfight in larger open space for the player that you can do against the other player. The other space in the ship have by default usually artificial gravity, but the player has the opportunity to be able to turn it off and use and use that as a way to change the situation for him in that zero gravity space that they just created. It could be against the NPC and the security guard that are being caught off guard, start floating in the air, that you can take them off while they're vulnerable or push them away. Or it could also be against other players. And that's where we build those spaces are interesting, because there's some of the elements that will only be accessible if you're using zero G to get there. So you can use that to try to take the advantage and the high ground against the other player and then turn off gravity. Or they can, on their side, turn gravity off, be able to suddenly close the gap against other player and use, for example, if they have shorter range weapon, close that gap against you and suddenly turn the table on you. So it's those moments that change the flow of combat and flow of gameplay that are really interesting to it.
You also brought up AI and NPCs that you're going to be fighting against. How is that going to work? Is it going to be mandatory to engage with them during each match? Or is it something that can be snuck past or avoided?
So the security guards and the security system are really core to the game, and player will need to interact with them in some way, because they are there and they are guarding the merge, which is the main objective for the player and the way for you to be able to win a match. Having said that, there's a lot of way that you can interact with them, so it's not necessarily going heads-on against them and fighting them. You have, as we were saying before, engage option, evade option, and exploit option, so you don't need to always go directly against them. You can try to use an evasion route to be able to go around some of the NPC and security guard threats. Having said that, the NPCs are not the only thing, and the PvE side is not the only thing. You need to take care about the other players and figure out how you will deal with them. That same way that you can decide to engage them, evade them, or try to exploit them. And that's where it's really interesting for the player that they need to balance the PvE, the security system, the security guards, and the other teams of hyenas that are there competing for them against the same goal. And a good player in hyenas will be able to take that to their own advantage, seeing how they manage with the PvE and the PvP, manipulating both of them, playing them each against each other to get the most out of the situation and find a way through that to win the game.
Is there any sort of a gun tier system so I know that I have the best gun possible? Or what kind of weapons are available to players?
So we want to make sure that we are covering a good variety in terms of weapon from the start, and we'll be growing that over time, obviously. So we start and we have all the staples that you expect in terms of shotgun, assault rifle, SMG, rifle, and some sidearms that you can pick from. The way that the weapons are working is that when you pick your hyena, it comes with a main primary weapon and also an ability, and that is really making the core of the gameplay from the hyena, from the character that you picked. Aside from that, you can then pick a specific sidearm that would complement it. So you're starting from that kit when you start your match, but that doesn't stop there, because through the game you can gain some power and make your equipment better. You can find some weapon buff and some gadget that you can then use to be able to take a more difficult challenge toward the end or compete with the other player that will still be there trying to get the merch out of you.
Speaking of interesting weapons, what was the weird white bubbly goop weapon shown in the trailer? And what other weird weapons are there that are going to be introduced in this world?
So that one is the foam gun. It's the primary ability from the Commander Wright, one of our characters. So it's a really good example of where we want to take some of those abilities in hyenas. It's giving a lot of options for the player and allow them to be creative in the way that they will be using them in the match. So if you're thinking about the foam gun, the first simpler use that you can get is that you can use it to foam some of the security guard. They will be stuck in it, and then you can finish them while they're vulnerable, or just get away from them during that time while they're dealing with the foam on them. But you can also use that to change the combat, change the situation. You can create cover with it. You could decide when you're engaging against other players that you need some time, retreat behind the door, foam the door, and then they will get more time to be with, so that gives you time to get other different strategy during that time. It can also be helpful for evading or reaching hard place. So you can create platform with it, you can jump on it and be able to reach other area that otherwise is not accessible unless if you use zero gravity. But sometimes switching the whole gravity state of an area is not the thing that the player will want to do, because it reveals their presence to all the other players that are in the same area. So using the foam gun is a more subtle way to be able to achieve that. So that's really our philosophy in hyenas for the abilities, and we want to make sure that each of the ability we bring will create those opportunities in terms of creativity and expression for the player.
How long are matches in hyenas? Do they feel like they go by really fast?
So the maximum duration of a match is 20 minutes, but that's the max. The average is more around 10-12 minutes, and it will obviously depend. If it's a closely contested match, it can run longer than that. If it's really dominated by one of the team, it can end sooner also. But it's not just about the duration. I think it's interesting for us to think about what is the flow and what is the progress from that match. In your early match, it's really about getting preparation, getting the first few items and supply in terms of power progression, leading towards your first objective, trying to get to your first vault. There is sometimes some PvP skirmish, but it's not full on during that time. After that, when we get more in the mid-match, around the 5-minute marks, that's usually the time where a couple of the vaults have been raided, some of the team has merch on them, and then the PvP is really getting more intense because players are getting close from getting the quota to do the getaway. So either players are converging on the last remaining votes that act as a PvP magnet, or you start chasing the other team to try to steal the merch that they got already. And then once one of the team managed to hit the quota, it's when things kick up a notch even more. It's a frantic race for them to get to their getaway, try to secure the loot that they have, and the other teams are trying to stop them while the ship is putting up its last defense in terms of security guards, security system, trying to prevent the hyenas from extracting the loot.
Well, hopefully every once in a while I can win a match. This sounds really, really interesting. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. While we get set up for our next interview, let's throw back to the studio to fill people in on how we can all sign up for the Hyenas Alpha.
Get in on the action for yourself and kick the tires on the game through the alpha test. Visit playhyenas.com to learn more and sign up for the alpha. But let's wrap things out with one final interview.
Joining me remotely via the power of the internet is executive producer on Hyenas, David Nicholson. Welcome.
Hey Dustin, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you also. I'm excited to talk about Hyenas, and Hyenas is a far cry from what we've seen out of Creative Assembly thus far. What inspired the team to make a games as a service first-person shooter?
Yeah, so the team that are making Hyenas are the team that brought you Alien Isolation and Halo Wars 2, games that we're super proud of, and we felt that they set the benchmark in those genres by being disruptive, bringing something into those genres that people hadn't seen before. And we want to do the same again with first-person shooters. So we're really excited to be announcing the game and also inviting players into our alpha and beta programs to help give us the feedback and help shape and steer the development of those games.
So I gotta be honest with you, it's really tough for any multiplayer shooter to stand out nowadays. There's a lot going on with Hyenas, but in short, what do you see as its hook?
Oh, you're right. It's such a busy market out there. There's some fantastic games, but I'll try and cover the hook of Hyenas in just 4 points. So it's the setting, it's the rich pricks on their rocket ships up to the tax havens in Mars, and they fuck the Earth while doing that, and it's now time for us to get our payback. It's then the characters, the Hyenas, the specialists, these misfit pirates out of place in space who are plundering these pop culture hordes on the ships. And then it's the game. It's crew versus crew. It's jacking ships, shooting clips, and robbing those rich pricks. And then it's the innovative gameplay. That's the zero-G that you've heard Alex talk about, and the PvEEVP that you've heard Charlie go into more detail about.
Well, I have 2 other important questions then. Is it free to play? And does it support crossplay?
So we are still evaluating the best way to bring Hyenas to market, but there are no current plans for the game to be free to play. And absolutely, we're super keen to support crossplay. We love that concept, and we're already talking to the first party platform holders about how exactly we do that.
That's great. I know any game that I play, I like to be able to hop to whatever platform I'm in the mood for. So that's really wonderful to hear. How will the live service game work for Hyenas though? Will it be a battle pass system? And if so, how long are seasons going to go for?
So with Hyenas, we're really, really keen to make a long-lasting, evolving hobby experience for players. That's really important for us to keep servicing that player experience. So we do have a seasonal plan. We've got some really strong opinions and some good ideas for that. But part of the reason we're going into alpha is to find out what players enjoy, what they value, and what they really want to see more of in the game. And that will really help us flesh out that roadmap going forward.
What's the communication strategy going to be like between devs and the community? Because you can do Reddit, you can do like the TWAB for Destiny, there's the Apex Legends strategy, or even the more V-Rising Twitter interactions. What are you guys going to plan for?
So that's a great question, because it's really, really important that we do build and establish this communication with our player base. So we're going to start small, but we've got big aspirations. So during closed alpha, we'll be on Discord. And if you get invited into that and have the opportunity to contribute, we'll be talking to you a lot on Discord. We've got some bots and some tools and some processes that we're already using to get your feedback direct to the people who need to hear that. so that we can react and respond and try and grow and evolve the game in line with what the players are asking for.
So when can we expect the full game, and more immediately, what can we expect to see from the alpha?
Okay, so we plan to launch next year in 2023, and in alpha you're really going to see the innovative gameplay. You're going to get a hint at that premise, that universe that Charlie was talking about earlier. You're going to play with those misfit, out-of-place characters, and you're going to get the opportunity to help shape that experience. As I say, we've got strong opinions, what we think are great ideas, but what we need to do now to get out into that space is to hear from the players, see what they enjoy, see what they value. So we're putting a lot of that into the alpha. So please sign up, join us, and contribute to helping shape the game.
David, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It was great to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Let's wrap things up back in the studio.
Huge shout out to our partners at Sega and Creative Assembly. Hyenas is coming to Xbox Series consoles, Xbox One and One X, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC sometime in 2023. Visit playhyenas.com to find out even more about the game and to sign up for the alpha. And of course, stay tuned to IGN.